The Indianapolis Colts will be a battleground this offseason. Several roster spots and starting positions are up for grabs in training camp. Let's get to it.
You are Locked On Colts, your daily Indianapolis Colts podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you all for tuning in and making us your first listen of the day. This is your daily podcast covering your Indianapolis Colts, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Hello, everyone. My name is Zach Hicks, your resident film nerd of HorseshoeHuddle.com. My partner in crime, Jake Arthur, is our credentialed boots on the ground for the site. We are here today taking a break from the positional preview series. Don't worry, that series will be back on tomorrow. But today, to break it all up a little bit, we're going to talk about the biggest camp battles heading into Colts training camp here at the end of July. We're going to preview some battles for starting positions, some battles for key rotational jobs, and then just some bottom of the roster battles with players who have a lot to gain and a lot to lose once training camp kicks off again at the end of July for the Colts. But Jake, let's kick it off with the starter battles, and obviously the one that's headlining this entire thing this offseason, the thing that none of us can avoid talking about for too long, and that is the battle for QB1 between Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson. We did get an update recently with Anthony Richardson. I think it was Zach Goodall, who is a Florida reporter who's had a relationship, obviously, with Richardson in the Florida program for a long time. So very much trust his reporting on the subject, just from his background. We've known Zach for a long time. He did report that Richardson is fully good to go for training camp. I think he even had a quote from Richardson in that report saying that Richardson views it as more of like a minor trip, and it's about just getting back up and getting ready to roll again. So we have had a lot of speculation on this podcast in particular, and just from everyone in the Colts media sphere, but it does look like Richardson should be a full go from early in training camp, and then they can resume the QB1 battle between Daniel Jones and Anthony Richardson here at the end of July.
Yeah, not many people have talked about the quarterback battle, but it's kind of it's kind of influential on how the season's going to go. No, obviously Daniel Jones versus Anthony Richardson is going to be a good one, and let's just say that the slate's wiped clean and they're both good to go from day one of training camp. Obviously Daniel Jones has like the slight leg up because he's been around. He's looked good so far in the spring. I'm very curious to see like what the criteria is going to be, because I know they're looking for the more consistent guy that moves the offense, again, with more consistency. And from day one, that kind of sounded like the tray would be set up a little bit easier for Daniel Jones, because especially in a practice setting, he's going to be rhythmic and take the easy stuff and, just kind of do what's asked of him. So the practice setting is probably going to be better set up for him to excel. Whereas Anthony, I think, would almost have to be uncharacteristically spotless. You know what I mean? Like he would have to have all the big plays we're used to seeing from him. But he also would have to, make sure the ball's off the grass and like he's finding open receivers. And I do think it would be a little more difficult for Anthony to have to, the criteria is more difficult for Anthony, I guess I'm trying to say, if all things are even, just because Daniel Jones being kind of a boring quarterback, that's what they're looking for in practice. So maybe that means that there's going to be a heavy weight put on preseason games and luckily the joint practices that they're going to have each of the first 2 weeks.
Yeah, and I think it all comes down to just how genuine the Colts are being with that statement on we're looking for consistency and we're looking for just that, that every down awareness and everything like that from their quarterback in this competition. How much of it is truth that they are actually looking for that? How much of it is, well, the flashes of Anthony Richardson are still great. We need to just go with the young guy and get him out there. This will be a very intriguing battle, and obviously will be the one that we all have our eyes on throughout all of training camp. But this next battle, Jake, I think is one that kind of emerged a little bit more than we expected in minicamp. I think we did always kind of think that Tanner Bortolini would be competing with Danny Pinter for that starting center job. But I don't think any of us really thought that it would be much of a competition. Similarly, like a Matt Gonsalves at right guard, we were told that was going to be a competition, but we don't even have that on this list because it doesn't appear like it's going to be one. They
Right.
can't even give that window dressing to us right now. Where Danny Pinter, according to what you saw there in minicamp, Jake, was getting some run with the first team over Tanner Bortolini. So I really want to ask you, like, how real do we think this battle is? Do we think it's just, the veterans getting some reps out there, but ultimately Bortolini will pull away? Or is this a situation where Pinter really could win this job?
I do expect Bortolini to be the heavy favorite for this, but like they alternated days as the first team center each day in OTAs and minicamp. So I mean, they are giving Pinter a fair shake at it, and I think Tony Sperano Jr. just feels that Pinter has earned the opportunity to compete for it, and that it's not just handed to Bortolini. But all things considered, it only makes sense to be Bortolini as long as he earns the job. Like it's what they drafted him for last year. It's why they felt comfortable letting Ryan Kelly walk. Like it's because Bortolini was there waiting in the wings. Now, like you mentioned with Gonzalez, to my recollection, it's been Gonzalez at right guard the entire time. Like there hasn't been another guy in there taking reps over him, which would really just be Dalton Tucker. But at the same time, Gonzalez only sparingly got reps in practice last year at guard. Like he was pretty much exclusively at tackle. So for that, they kind of know he's going to be the starter, I think, and they're just trying to probably pour every rep they can into him. So it's a slightly different scenario just because Bortolini got a lot of reps last year at the position he's trying out for.
Yeah, I think the only thing that kind of seems interesting to me in this Bortolini versus Pinter competition is the fact that, Bortolini was healthy going into, I want to say it was it the Broncos game or the Patriots game? Whichever game was the later game. I want to say it was
Yeah.
the Broncos game was the later game. Bortolini was healthy coming off concussion, and Pinter still got the start in that game. Now,
Mhm.
there was the aspect of Pinter practice that entire week. Bortolini didn't, and the Colts are very big on who's getting reps throughout the week. And
Yeah.
they might have seen it as those guys were close enough to where they just gave the nod to Pinter. But to me, that does say that there might be something there with giving Pinter these reps. So that will certainly be one to watch. Another one that I'm kind of willing into existence, I think. I don't know how close it really is, but I think I've convinced Jake at least a little bit
Hmm.
here. Is that starting outside cornerback spot of Jalen Jones and Justin Wally. Now, I do think Jalen Jones wins this battle. I don't think that
Yeah.
Wally's going to somehow win this one, at least early in the season. But I think it's closer than what many would expect. Jones is a very solid young corner who's only getting better, but Wally, at least to me, and Jake, you can put water on this if you want, it feels like they're looking for any excuse to get Wally out there. I think this coaching
Mhm.
staff loves them, and I think he fits everything they're looking for. And measurable wise, he's almost exactly the same player as Cam Taylor-Britt, who Lou
Mhm.
Anarumo threw to the Wolves like early and often with the Bengals. One of the only young players he ever threw to the Wolves with the Bengals. So I wouldn't be shocked if Justin Wally has a much bigger role early in the season than what many expect.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. It does seem like they're just looking for any excuse to get him out there, and it could. You never hope for this, but it could take the shape of Wally replacing someone in the lineup who's been injured. And I don't. Again, I don't think they care whether that's inside or out. They may view him long term in one area, but if Kenny goes down, I think Wally is perhaps the first guy they would look at to back him up. Jalen Jones, again, like obviously Trevarius Ward, like inside or out, I think they just want to get him on the field. And the big thing with him, and I'm imagining Jerome Henderson and Hewitt as well, the DB's coaches, physical talent is great, but what's your mentality? And like, do you get it? Are you a smart football player? And that's usually like his mental intangibles and his mental makeup is usually what they are raving about first when it comes to Wally. So I do think they're going to have a role for him regardless, but like they probably want to get him as many reps as possible.
Yeah, you look at guys that these coaches have worked with in the past. Anarumo worked with Cam Taylor-Britt, Hewitt working with Brandon Stevens, who was a third-round pick, big, strong, fast guy. Jerome Henderson, they had a lot of big corners out there with the Giants. He does fit what a lot of these cornerbacks coaches and just DB coaches in general are looking for. So I think he could get the field a little bit earlier than we expect. One more position battle to mention before we go to our break here, and that is the kicker battle between Spencer Schrader and Maddox Trujillo. Much to my chagrin, I don't want to talk about this, but besides quarterback, it might be the most wide open position on the roster this offseason, where sure, they probably have a preference in a Spencer Schrader winning this job, but I don't think this one is anywhere near like where they like have like a very preference player like at center and an outside corner. I think at kicker it really is like whoever is the better guy in the offseason is going to win this job.
I would agree with that. Now, I do think there's part of it where Schrader has the inside track because they didn't know Maddox Trujillo was going to be part of the team when they cut Matt Gay, and they were comfortable with having Spencer Schrader be the guy versus some competition, which has become Trujillo. But like Schrader and Brian Mason go way back. Like Brian Mason recruited Schrader to Notre Dame, and then they didn't get to really work together because Mason left for the NFL, but he told Schrader, he's like, stay at Notre Dame. That's the place for you. And then here they are, they've reconnected in the NFL. So there is a lot of familiarity there. So I do think Schrader has the inside track, but just from what I've seen briefly of the two in OTAs and minicamp, that ball explodes off Maddox Trujillo's foot. Both these guys have plenty of leg power, but I think what the Colts are mainly going to be looking for is what's your deep accuracy look like? Because when you get into traditional field goal range, down and distance considered, the Colts are going to go for it on fourth down more often than not. So, I mean, they really want someone who's going to be good and reliable in deep kick situations, 40, 45, 50 plus. And I think that's really what it's going to come down to. But they think that both of these guys are like 75% college kickers, so not great. But they think both of them have like the makeup to be good kickers that they can develop. So they'll go with one, and the other one might wind up on the practice squad, and we could see them again.
Yeah, and that is your Locked On Colts kicker report here for the offseason. That's all you guys are going to get from us, especially if I have my way. But coming up, we're going to talk about the battles for key rotational jobs. Which key positional battles are still on this roster aside from being starting jobs?
All right, guys, let's be real. You've probably heard of Viagra or Cialis. Maybe you've even tried them. But if you're looking for something beyond the usual pill, it's time to meet Rugiet Ready. Rugiet Ready is a next-gen prescription treatment designed to amplify arousal in the brain and boost blood flow. Unlike the usual pills that can take hours, Rugiet's 3-in-1 formula dissolves under your tongue, and it kicks in fast, on average in just 15 minutes, actually. Effects can even last up to 36 hours, so that you can stay confident and in control when the moment is right, and it preserves a little spontaneity there too. If traditional options haven't worked for you, Rugiet might be the answer. Over 150,000 men have already made the switch. You can even read real customer reviews on the site. It's helping a lot of people feel more confident and present in the moment. So head to Rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL and use code LockedOnNFL to get 15% off today. That is Rugiet.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL for 15% off. Individual results may vary with prescription treatment. Compounded drugs are permitted to be prescribed under federal law, but are not FDA approved and do not undergo FDA safety, effectiveness, or manufacturing review. Please visit Rugiet website for full safety information. All right, Zach. So not all battles are for starters, but it doesn't make them any less important because, as we know, lots of position groups rotate madly. And one that we really want to talk about because it's going to have guys in the second wave playing starter snaps, really, is defensive end. And this one is super interesting. You actually wrote about it the other day over on Horseshoe Huddle. Samson Ebukam, Tyquan Lewis, and JT Tuimoloau behind what we presume is going to be Laiatu Latu and Kwity Paye. I'm sure it's going to be very role-based. But, you know, Ebukam's kind of the ultimate X factor in this because we didn't see him in the spring because he's still recovering from that Achilles. So we don't know what they're going to put on his plate. And JT Tuimoloau is a rookie. So he could be brought along slowly as a rookie, or if he's great, maybe he's even threatening for starter snaps. We don't know. So they've got a couple guys there that we just have no clue what the role is really going to amount to.
Yeah, it's a really difficult position to gauge just from looking at the depth and looking at what this rotation is going to be for the Colts, because you could tell me any of these five guys is second in snaps in the room behind Leatu Latu, and it wouldn't shock me. I could see a scenario where Tyquan Lewis is the player that, this new coaching staff falls in love with. Ebukam defies all the odds and gets back to his 2023 form, and he's the second leader in snaps. Kwity Paye is just being Kwity Paye. Or maybe the young guy who actually has ties to this new coaching staff is the player that wins their hearts early and often this offseason and gets a lot of that playing time. I really have no clue how this is going to shake out, and that's what prompted me to write about Tuimoloau for Horseshoe Huddle, because there are just so many factors here. I mean, you and I have been fairly pessimistic on Samson Ebukam getting back to that form because he's an older pass rusher coming off an Achilles injury, but the Colts seem very optimistic going into this season about him being that third rusher, maybe being a starter alongside Leatu Latu and getting some legit pass rushing snaps. Tyquan Lewis, we can never count him out, when it comes to this Colts team getting legit snaps. And then again, Tuimoloau, he's a young player. Lou Anarumo has traditionally not played young pass rushers. When he was with the Cincinnati Bengals, he had two top 100 picks at defensive end in his time with the Bengals, and neither player hit 40% of available snaps in their rookie season. But does that change this year with a lot of uncertainty at the Colts edge room? He always had Hendrickson and Hubbard there with the Bengals, so maybe that contributed a little bit to it. I don't think Paye is really on the same level of those guys in terms of trustability, I guess, on the outside. So yeah, this is really interesting to me. I really do think training camp and the preseason is going to play a huge factor here. Does Ebukam retain some of that explosiveness from 2023? Does Lewis show a little bit more pop in the pass rushing game when he looked like he took a step back last year? And does Tuimoloau just impress so much that you can't keep him down? Like, I really think this group could result in so many different things this offseason.
For sure. And another one that I think is pretty interesting, because there's a lot of guys involved in it, but it really comes down to these two, Mo Alie-Cox and Drew Ogletree. Now, I think there could be a final numbers game at tight end, and this could all just be a moot point if no one behind them steps up. So we know Tyler Warren is going to be there, and we know Mo Alie-Cox and Drew Ogletree are the next two guys up. But let's say Jelani Woods stays healthy and starts to show signs of being that guy that everyone got excited about a couple years ago, or Will Mallory. Now that you have your tight end one that can kind of do everything in Tyler Warren, you have a little more flexibility to be able to use a Will Mallory, and you don't have to be stuck having to use two or three tight ends at a time necessarily. So it allows, Will Mallory and Jelani Woods a little more freedom to be used. And I mean, you don't want to carry like 4 or 5 tight ends. So does that leave Mo Alie-Cox and Drew Ogletree just battling for one spot? Because they both are viewed by the Colts as like their top blocking tight ends who can contribute in the passing game as well. Ogletree's probably a little more dangerous, I would imagine, but Mo comes up in big moments. Like if you need a 4th down or like a late 3rd and 10 or whatever, both those guys have some use there. So I think if Jelani Woods and Will Mallory are doing well, then you might just be trying to decide between one spot with Mo Alie-Cox and Drew Ogletree. And I don't really think the Colts thought they were going to be in that position, because I think they would love to keep both of them. But again, it's a numbers game. And do you really want to shoo away these talented pass catchers in Jelani Woods and Will Mallory just because you have two really good blocking tight ends that you like?
Yeah, we don't know. I mean, because they never had to make this decision yet, because Jelani Woods has always been hurt by the end of the offseason. So they haven't had to make this decision yet. This could finally be the offseason where they actually have to choose there. We have a lot of other good ones here. We have DJ Giddens and Khalil Herbert. I think Giddens probably has the leg up in that battle, but Herbert's been there, done that. And honestly, I wouldn't even count out Tyler Goodson. This coaching staff does really like him. And it wouldn't even shock me come cut down day if Goodson were to beat out a player like Herbert for RB3 and be that third guy. Special teams. Yeah, they love special teams. One more I want to add here, actually, that's not on your list too, Jake, is what does the dime rotation look like? Who is that 6th DB coming on the field? You mentioned a lot in minicamp that Rodney Thomas seemed to have a leg up there just getting on the field in those sets. The Colts went more 3 safety. So is it Thomas getting out there? Maybe a Hunter Wohler comes on the field and takes some box snaps, Or do they just find a way to get Justin Wally on the field, in those 6 DB sets? I think that'll be a really interesting development to follow in training camp, is just who is getting those snaps in those dime looks, in those 6 DB, those lighter box, heavier like defensive backs on the field. I'm very intrigued to see what those sets look like for the Colts.
Yeah, I think that'll just depend on situation, whether it's more of a pass or a run. But I mean, we'll see. I think we'll see a little bit of everything when it comes to that. A couple smaller ones before we move on. We talked a lot about linebacker yesterday with Shegu Alubi, Joe Bacci, and Cameron McGrone. But also swing tackle is technically up for debate still. Blake Freeland has direct competition now with Jalen Travis. I think Jalen Travis hopefully factors into the long-term plan, maybe at right tackle when Braden Smith has gone elsewhere. But, Blake Freeland's still in this thing, and he wasn't supposed to be a guy that was an immediate hit. So maybe his third summer, he looks adequate and makes things a little bit interesting. We'll see. But coming up, guys, there are some players really facing some questions on whether or not they'll even be on the roster. And there might be battling for one spot left on the roster. And there's several of these to choose from. Do you ever wish managing your money felt easier? Well, with Monarch Money, it can be. Whether you're growing your savings or planning a big purchase, Monarch puts you in the driver's seat. It's like having your own personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money is more than a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all your accounts, investments, and spending in one place. So in addition to managing your money, you're also building wealth. A lot of you are probably in a similar boat as me. I'm married with one kid, another on the way, and we need to move by the end of the year. We've just outgrown our house. That's a lot of expensive things to be happening at once. And having all your accounts, including investments, in one spot, super valuable, and it helps make everything seem real and tangible. You don't have to go here and here and here to find everything that's under your name. So take control of your finances with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off of your first year. That's monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off of your first year. All right, let's get spicy with some of these camp battles first. And these aren't necessarily for primary roles or starting positions, but they're for roster spots here. So we've got kind of two schools of thought when you look at the cornerback group. You and I were talking, off air. You got Jalen Jones and Justin Wally and Trevarius Ward and Kenny Moore. Those are your guys. But JuJu Brents and Samuel Womack, that seems like a very intriguing spot. Guys who would be counted on mostly for defense, but would probably have to have some sort of special teams utility to stick around. And then Corey Ballantyne and David Long, who are core special teamers who you really hope don't have to play defense, but they do have a lot of starting experience, both of them, in their past. So those 5th and 6th cornerback spots, I think, are kind of interesting.
Yeah, especially when you look at Brents and Womack, where it's more so pedigree versus production. The pedigree of JuJu Brents being a top 50 pick, player the Colts have wanted to work out in this system, but just hasn't the last couple of years. And then Womack, where, yes, towards the end of last year, he was getting beat deep a little bit more than what you wanted, but for the most part, was a pretty solid starting corner for this team in 2024. So I think that's going to be a big thing, is how much does the staff value that pedigree of Brents being that top pick from a couple years ago, or Womack just being a producer last year on the football field, something that Brents hasn't done since he's hit the NFL. And then, when it comes to Ballantyne and Long, we could say, Ballantyne's going to be their core special teamer, but Womack or Brents could be a core special teamer as well. So I think you kind of group these 4 guys all together, and it's kind of tough to see where the Colts are going to go. I could see any combination of these bottom 4 guys being cornerback 5 and 6. I do think they keep 6 corners this year because Anarumo, again, loves dime, loves keeping more defensive backs. I think 6, maybe even 7 corners. I could totally see that from this team. But it is a very, very interesting battle there at the bottom of the roster. I do want to bring up one player, because there was a really funny clip with you and Grover Stewart last year with this player, so I always have to bring him up with you. But 2, because I think he's got the biggest roster mobility of anybody on the team this year, and that's Adetomiwa Adebawore. If you told me by the end of training camp that he is a fringe starter who's getting 40 to 45% of the defensive snaps this year, I'd say cool. The snaps are there for him. Dio has left the team, so there are a lot of opportunities for him, and I could totally see it. But if you also told me that he didn't make the team and was released or traded at the end of training camp, I'd say, yeah, I mean, I could see it. I could see it just because of he's a weird fit with this two-gapping scheme on run defense, and maybe he's not the ideal guy you want there at backup 3 tech. So I could really see him being anywhere from a major contributor in this Colts defense next year or completely off the roster by the end of training camp.
Yeah, I think he and Isaiah Land both have that really tough uphill battle again, just because they've been able to get by the past couple years being young, high potential athletic guys. But now it's just kind of a numbers game and everyone's butts on the line and it's all about wins now. And patience in developing players doesn't really take precedent anymore. So yeah, Isaiah Land, we've talked about, JT Tuimoloau and Laiatu Latu. That's kind of got to be where their young player resources are. And then, like you mentioned with Adetomiwa, they have Neville Gallimore in there. Financially, they're not super tied into him. I think they expect him to contribute for them this year and be, the pass rushing interior guy from the 3 tech behind Buck that they haven't really had. But at the same time, I don't think they're really going to stifle Ade if he's playing well. So I think you're right. He could be a very key rotational guy who's played more than he has in his first couple years, or he could just totally lose outright in a numbers game, because another side of this thing we're talking about is Tim Smith versus Eric Johnson at the backup nose tackle, which you and I, when they claimed Eric Johnson back, we immediately read that as, okay, if Tim Smith doesn't cut it, then there they go. They know who Eric Johnson is, at least. He's had a year away in New England to maybe get even better. Who knows? But Tim Smith, he was about 6th rounder, 6th, 7th rounder. So by no means a shoe-in for the roster. But again, he's going to be kind of a tough evaluation, I think, because just he's not supposed to be flashy. He's supposed to be kind of boring. But it's how effectively is that boring level of play where he just eats blocks and clogs a lane and doesn't allow runs to get past him. So yeah, I really, the entire second, third wave of the defensive line is really up for grabs.
Yeah, and I'll even add one more wrinkle to this, where I think you and I both agree that Neville Gallimore, we prefer to have him at 3 tech, backup 3 tech. It's kind of he's much bigger than a Taven Bryan was. He's got 30 pounds on Taven Bryan. But it's kind of like a Taven Bryan situation where, in my opinion, I'd rather have him at backup 3 tech. But it's the Colts we're talking about here. Maybe he's their backup nose tackle, and we're looking at Adetomiwa being the backup 3 tech. Or maybe somehow Eric Johnson's competing for backup 3 tech. Or maybe it's even more fluid than what we expect, and maybe there is no backup 3 tech, and it's just backup defensive tackles. And they go with that. So a lot of stuff up in the air for backup defensive tackle in general. Tight end, we've mentioned a couple times already, Will Mallory and Jelani Woods. Again, with those 4 guys behind Tyler Warren, I think anything is up for grabs right now. I could see any combination of the Colts keeping 3 of those guys, or maybe just keeping 2 of them. Maybe the Colts go into next season with just 3 tight ends on the roster because they expect Warren to get so many snaps. I doubt it because the way they've used tight ends the last couple of years, but I could totally see that happening this offseason. So yeah, Mallory, Woods, Ogletree, and Mo, I think it's going to be a really interesting move. We might finally see a cut down happening with that position group this offseason, and maybe they actually have to make a choice for once. And then one more thing I really want to mention is just, what does the numbers game look like at the bottom of the roster at offensive line? I think we have 7 guys who we feel really good about in terms of the 5 starters, whoever the 5 are going to be, the backup at center, which is going to be either Pinter or Bortolini, and then Jalen Travis is likely going to be, in my opinion, that swing offensive tackle. Do the Colts feel good enough about the other offensive linemen on the roster, from Josh Sills to Mose Viveo, Wesley French coming back from an injury, Blake Freeland in there? Do they feel good about that group, or do they grab another player? Dalton Tucker is another guy that's in there as well. He might be number 8, honestly, in my opinion, that I feel decent about. But even then, do you feel good about Dalton Tucker as your 8th guy, as your swing guard on the team? I think that'll be a really interesting development this offseason for the Colts.
Yeah, I think I still would go with one more veteran, just because you and I recently, when we talked about the backup offensive line, like when I saw it in person at minicamp and we wrote it out and we spoke about it left to right, we're like, this doesn't inspire a ton of confidence. And we're going to see that unit together a lot throughout the preseason and everything. So, yeah, I think I'd probably still go with one more veteran just to be safe. But I think going basically polar opposite, backup safety is also an interesting one as well. Rodney Thomas, I think, has probably got an advantage right now. We've seen him a lot. Again, when they go to those dime sets, he goes back while Nick Cross goes up. Daniel Scott, they've been dying for him to stay healthy and show them what he's got. And Trey Washington, who is really our UDFA darling so far this year. He made at least one play during minicamp against A.D. Mitchell. So there's no reason backup safety shouldn't be wide open. None of the guys behind Bynum and Cross have really, staked their claim into anything. So I would totally just let that one be best man wins.
Yeah, another part of that too is how much does Hunter Wohler factor in at actual safety? I mean, we've been talking about him.
For him being a 7th rounder, I do almost like he's on the roster for me.
Yeah.
Like he does, not that he doesn't have to battle, but like I almost don't even consider him battling for it because he has a niche role.
Right. I think the thing for me though is just how much is safety part of that for him though, because if safety is like 80% of it for him, then it could lessen the need to keep another safety, like a 5th safety on the roster. Whereas if safety is just like him moonlighting back there every now and then and not really playing safety, then maybe you keep a Thomas and a Daniel Scott and a Trey Washington, like however it's going to be. So again, there's so much up in the air with this roster. That's why we're doing these positional previews for you guys to really go position by position and talk about all of them. But I think today was a good kind of headliner, just looking at every single spot and saying like what's up for grabs and what could really change in the offseason. I think a lot of it is up for grabs right now. But we do want to thank you guys for making Locked On Colts your first listen today and every day. Now, for your second listen, check out Locked On NFL Scouting as training camps get closer and the moves are being made. Host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. And if you guys want to become a Locked On Colts insider and chat with us directly and get the insider scoop, follow the link in our show notes. And if you don't already, make sure you're following at Locked On Colts, at Jake Arthur NFL, and at Zach Hicks2, all on Twitter. Also, subscribe to us on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. We love your guys' ratings, reviews, and we'll catch you guys back here tomorrow afternoon.